Hey, hello, hi. What's up, Twins fans? Derek Wetmore here, 1500 ESPN. Kind of taking over their Facebook page and just hanging out. I want to answer your Twins questions. It's been a little while since I've done one of these videos because the winter meetings sort of changed the session feel. It wasn't morning coffee Q&A. It was, oh my gosh, there are 600 people in the lobby behind me. How can I stand the least awkwardly and record this video? So this one will be back to normal. I promise. I'll try and answer as many questions as I can. If you've got any, leave them in the comment section. That's how I can read them. They'll pop up on my phone here. It's a new phone, so I'm hoping that it still works the same way as it did. But if there are any kinks, we'll straighten those out, and I'll get to your questions. As many of them as I possibly can. I know I try to answer all of them, but sometimes I'll go back to this video the next day. I'll see it on our Facebook, and I didn't get to all of them. There were questions that I just left unanswered, didn't see them. I'm sorry. I always try to answer those on Facebook. Let me get a couple of self-promotion things out of the way while we sort of let the room fill up here. And fill up is a very relative term, but while the few loyal fans trickle in to ask their Twins offseason questions about why they haven't traded Brian Dozier yet, I'll get my self-promotion out of the way first. So yesterday, I wrote a piece on Miguel Sano. It's part of an ongoing series that I'm doing. Basically, just looking back at the 2016 season. It's not spending a lot of time looking forward at the 2017 season. Excuse me. We'll have plenty of time to do that as spring training approaches. Trust me, there will be plenty of Twins off-season stuff to get to in January, in February, in March. Once spring training gets rolling, there will be no shortage of storylines to talk about. But this piece was technically the second one in the 2016 off-season review. Miguel Sano, my basic conclusion, you can read the piece if you want to. I posted it to 1500ESPN.com, and I also sent it out to my email list. If you're interested in that, circle up with me after the video. I can show you how to get on the email list. It's pretty simple. It's like an email newsletter on Twins columns and stuff like that. The basic premise that I came to was, not a great year for Miguel Sano. A good year, though. And I think that we tend to be victims of our own expectations. I had a track coach tell me that one time, and I thought it was one of the most wise things a track coach has ever told a reporter. He said, if you expect Miguel Sano to be a Hall of Famer, and he puts up a season like the one that he had last year. Let me turn my volume down so your guys' notifications aren't blowing up on the video. And he has a season like 2016. You're disappointed. You think, man, there's got to be more in there, right? Yes, I think that there is. I think he's a 23-year-old slugger who had a down season compared to his rookie year, but is a fantastic hitter in time. I think he's the kind of guy that will mature into a star. I had somebody ask me after that column, who's more important to the Twins' future, Byron Buxton or Miguel Sano? And it's a really hard question to answer just because their value's different. I mean, Buxton's going to derive a lot of value defensively, and if he hits like he hit in September, like he's a superstar, and his defense will start to get noticed a little bit more. People around the league will say, like, oh, Buxton is not only an offensive threat, but what a defensive stud. Yeah, we've been saying that since the day he was called up. He was a defensive stud from day one. The speed, the arm, the range, I think he could improve his routes and reads and things like that, but keep in mind, he's still young. I think he's still getting better as a player, which is probably a scary thing for the rest of the league to think about. But even with what you might call some shortcomings, he's still a terrific defensive center fielder. But so anyway, to answer the question, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I don't know who the best or most important player is going to be for the Twins in 3 years, but it opens an interesting discussion. We can definitely talk about that. Maybe that's a Touch 'em All podcast someday. I think that'd make for a good podcast. Final bit of self-promotion, and then I will just jump into your questions here because I see I'm starting to fill up the queue. If you enjoy Twins chatter, talking about the Twins, finding links, finding other Twins fans, anything, like my Facebook page. You're on the 1500 ESPN page right now, so that's good start. I also have a personal Facebook page, just like my personal Twitter account. My Facebook page is Derek Wetmore MLB. I just wanted to distinguish from the 8 other Derek Wetmores that were out there. So go find that, like that page. I try to post all my stuff there, post these videos, and some lively Twins discussion. I thought there was some really good answers from fans yesterday when I brought up something that I don't understand why there's a certain bulk of Twins fans thinking this way. And when I outlined that, there were, it was maybe a dozen people that chimed in and said, yeah, but think about it from this perspective. And I was like, okay, awesome. This is exactly what I want. So anyways, that's all my self-promotion. Find my Miguel Sano piece. Find my Facebook page. Now let's do the questions, because that's what you came for. And I got to pick this up because this phone doesn't show the questions quite as well as my other one did. Let's see. Derek Copeland asks, is there any chance we trade Berrios? I don't think so, but don't rule it out. Falvey and Levine have been asked multiple times and have been given plenty of opportunities to say player X is untradeable. I sort of expect them to say something like, Byron Buxton is untradeable. Miguel Sano is untradeable. Anyone else, there's a price. But every single time they've been asked, they've said something to the effect of, you lose 103 games, there's a price for everyone. We'll consider any trade that makes the team better, short-term and long-term. And I kind of think in their mind there are some players that are untradeable. But the fact that they won't say it, that they won't rule it out, because the day you say, well, Jose Berrios, we think he's going to be a good young pitcher, a solid number 2, solid number 3, whatever he winds up being, we're not going to trade him. He's untradeable. Okay, but then if the Angels come calling and say, hey, we just need one pitcher, we think Berrios is the final piece, we'll give you Mike Trout and a young prospect. You're like, okay, well, shoot, we shouldn't have said he was untradeable. That's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, Derek, but I think that the way that I'd think about any prospect if you're the Twins is we'd like to build around him, we'd like him to be sort of part of the core going forward. If somebody gives us someone that we value more or we think is going to be a better player long-term, I think you have to listen to it. If you're talking a percentage chance that Berrios gets traded, it's probably not very significant, but as I like to say often, non-zero. And I hope you guys don't mind, too. I brought my coffee because it's a morning coffee Q&A session. Keith. Keith says, good morning. In your opinion, are the Dodgers in the lead in the Dozier trade saga? Yeah. Oh, sorry, Derek. That was a good question, so I'm going to give you a little thumbs up. Same with you, Keith. In the lead, yeah, probably. They've got a deep well of prospects. That's the big thing. The Dodgers and Twins just seem to fit so well that you could see a trade coming together. And it's understandable why that's all the steam. I'll say quickly, before I get into a better answer to your question, some more self-promotion. I wrote a column recently about some other teams that might make sense. This was not, deeply sourced. This wasn't, look out for a trade to this team. It was, hey, I don't know, I'm just looking at the rosters here, and you keep hearing about the Dodgers. You haven't heard any other teams involved. In fact, when somebody tried to throw out the Yankees line of steam, GM Brian Cashman went on MLB Network Radio and said that it was a false report. He said he hasn't talked to the Twins about Dozier at all. Ugh. So, a long story short, I wrote a column that said, hey, these teams could make some sense. I'm not saying they're in. I'm not saying they're out. I'm just saying they could use a star second baseman like Brian Dozier on a team-friendly contract with all of the home runs. Those teams, just to tease the piece, and if you want to read it, you can, and if you don't, I'll just give it to you for free here. I picked the Cardinals, the Yankees, and the Angels. Various reasons, and some of you might be scratching your head at 2 or all 3 of those. And that's fine. I explained it in the piece. There's a lot of sense that it could be the Dodgers. And I'm not saying that it won't be the Dodgers. I ruled out some other contenders too in that piece, so it wasn't just about those 3 teams. But anyway, Keith, to answer your question in the longest-winded way possible, I think that the fit makes so much sense because the Dodgers are ready to win a World Series. They don't have a great option at second base right now. Even if they were to re-sign Chase Utley, I think that Brian Dozier is a better second baseman at this point. Dozier's cheap, and I'd say that's an instigating factor because the Dodgers probably don't want to spend that much money after signing Kenley Jansen and Justin Turner. They've got a lot of money on the books, and they're going to be in the luxury tax if they don't do something. Rosters can always change, so who knows? Maybe. We'll see. But basically, the fact that Dozier only costs $6 million this next year and $9 million the season after that should be a really positive thing for the Twins in terms of getting better value for him. So those are three reasons that it makes sense for the Dodgers to want Dozier. Also, weren't great against left-handed pitching last year, and I would argue they already had a really good team last year. Dozier helps with that a lot. He obviously adds some power. I don't think he'll hit 42 home runs again, but I think he's a power threat that the Dodgers could put just about anywhere in the lineup, and he would help with their left-handed pitching on an affordable contract. Why it makes sense for the Twins to go to the Dodgers? Look at how many young pitchers that are ready to surface in the major leagues that the Dodgers have. You know, in most cases, I'd be banging my head against a wall that people aren't talking enough about Julio Urias because he's fantastic. He's the 20-year-old lefty you saw in the postseason last year. I wouldn't expect the Dodgers to include Urias in basically any trade conversations. So ordinarily, I'd be like, man, you guys are getting too excited about this Jose De Leon kid. But De Leon's put up some nice numbers in the minor leagues, and he's just one of a handful of good young pitchers that the Dodgers have. And the Dodgers rotation already, I mean, if you're writing it in on paper, it's full. I mean, they're going to have a 6th and 7th starter that some teams would like to have in their rotation. Those guys aren't going to make the rotation. So it makes a lot of sense from a fit perspective from both teams that would be the trade, Keith. But I would say two things. One, don't guarantee that he's getting traded. Two, don't guarantee if he does get traded, it'd be to the Dodgers. I knew I'd come into some Brian Dozier questions. Keith, thanks for the question. Maybe there will be some more here the rest of this. But thanks for hanging out today. Adam asks, am I crazy for thinking Mauer could be a right fielder, first baseman, third baseman, utility player under the new leadership? Let me ponder that while I get my next sip of coffee. Crazy, I hate the word crazy. You're not crazy. I think it's smart to think for different angles, ways that you could add value at the margins. Like we had the whole Jason Castro conversation. Think whatever you want about him as a hitter. If he adds any value to the pitching staff, whether it's through his leadership, whether it's through his game planning, whether it's like video scouting, which, by the way, Kurt Suzuki never got enough credit for doing. He was doing all of that stuff too. Or if it's his pitch framing, which Kurt Suzuki does not grade out as well, or if it's his throwing out base runners. If he can help pitchers at the margin get, X% better, or even a fraction of a percent better, it starts to change your mind about the signing. Your Mauer idea, same sort of deal. If you're freeing up roster space because you want Kenny Vargas to get some more playing time, or you think Byung-Ho Park's going to be a real player, so he needs more time at first base, yeah, then I see what you're going for. I think, though, based on Paul Mahler's comments to 1500 ESPN earlier in the offseason when he spoke with Mackey and Judd, and then circle back at the winter meetings and ask these kinds of questions, I think Mauer's not going to be an everyday player this year. I think that he is going to play first base. I don't see him putting on a third base glove, but I could be wrong. I've certainly been wrong before. Mauer, to me, and we've talked about this before, if you're on a continuum and there are Mauer bashers and Mauer defenders, I'm probably somewhat in the middle, but I'm leaning towards defender. Joe Mauer, borderline Hall of Fame career. Fantastic player for a number of years. Not quite the same guy anymore, and I get it. The big contract makes Twins fans mad. It's a sunk cost. I think it's more likely that Mauer would be a part-time player at first base, because if you have him off of first base, basically the reason would be to rest him and to find good matchups and things like that to sort of maximize Mauer's value. So to answer your question in a really long way, Adam, I don't think you're crazy, but I don't see it happening. I don't think Mauer's going to get an outfield glove. I don't think he's going to play third base. I think he's going to rest on the days he's not playing first base. And that's because I used to make that same sort of argument, right, that Mauer could kind of move around. He could play anywhere he's athletic enough. Maybe you don't want him at shortstop or center field, but that he could play in the corners. I don't see the same Mauer. I don't see him as being as athletic as he was 2 or 3 years ago. And it's sort of the aging curve, but you think of the guy. When I see Mauer, I still picture the 2006 swing. And he had that swing for a number of years, but that's just kind of what stands out, on the baseball card kind of thing. It's a bit of a shell of his former self, and I think not only from an offensive profile perspective, he's still fine at first base, but I mean athletically. Like, I don't know if he'd still be playing quarterback, if these were the Cretan days. He's got his strengths, his weaknesses, and I think athleticism used to be a hardcore strength and now is kind of faded as he gets into his early to mid-30s here. I just think that's the reality. So don't rule it out, Adam. I like your thinking. You're not crazy, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I'll give you a like because it's a good question. What else we got here? Man, I'm just handing out the likes like candy today, you guys. Problem with baseball, too long a games, too long a season, and the sports talkers never stop talking about it. Well, thanks for stopping by, Andy. I'm not sure what you want me to say about that. We'll just stick to the people who like baseball in this thread because those are the only people I care about. Jeffrey Hine, who I know likes baseball. I see his comments every once in a while over on my page. Jeffrey asks, why haven't the Twins done anything with their pitching? Same pitchers and pitching coaches last season. Why should we expect the pitching to be any better in 2017? Boom. More free candy of a like. There you go, bud. It's a good question, but one thing I will point out, as much as I think they probably should do something, I think there are two pitchers that will make a much bigger impact than they did last year. I got to keep an eye on the clock here too, guys. I'm going on with Mackie and Judd at 11:45 to talk about the Twins. So if you want to hear some more Twins talk, it's 1500 ESPN. You can stream us online or you can get us on your AM radio. That's at 11:45, and we'll probably go till 12:15. I think a half hour of Twins talk. Twins in Major League Baseball. So anyway, that's why I've got my computer screen open here so I can watch the clock. Jeffrey, to answer your question, two guys that I don't think had a real big impact last year, at least in terms of the starting rotation, but could have a big impact actually, I should add three guys to this list. In 2017, these are three guys who should impact the rotation much more than they did in 2016. One of them is Phil Hughes. You're kind of gambling with the injury there, right? He had thoracic outlet syndrome. He got surgery to sort of correct that, and you're expecting him to come to spring training fully healthy and ready to go. If he can, and he can give you more than 56 bad innings, that's a big upgrade for the rotation. You're paying that guy a lot of money. You're expecting him to be one of your horses, and last year he was not. If he can rebound from a health perspective and from a performance perspective, no one's expecting 2014 Phil Hughes. I think that's just his career year. Because you look at the rest of his career around that, and it's kind of just been like the talk in New York, right? It's a big-time prospect that, okay pitcher, but didn't quite pan out the way a lot of prospect wonks had kind of hoped. I think he'll be a guy that you can count on more in 2017. So there's one name. We can talk plenty more about that probably in future episodes, and especially as we get towards spring training. Here's another guy, Trevor May. Trevor May was a reliever last year. I am advocating and have been since, I think, the first Morning Coffee Twins video that we did. I think that's where I brought it out. Trevor May needs to be in the starting rotation. He had stretches of dominance last year as a reliever. Obviously, the back pain sort of screwed up his whole year, and his stats look ugly. Don't get me wrong. I've seen the ERA. I know it's not good. And I know you can't just pick and choose stats to make them say what you want them to, but you go back and look at his 2016 season. This is Trevor May I'm talking about. There was like a 10-inning stretch where he was a disaster and just giving up runs left and right, can't strike anybody out, can't miss any bats, giving up walks, giving up hits, giving up home runs. Train wreck. Take out those 10 innings. I want you, if you're interested, Jeffrey, go check out his game log and remove those runs and those innings. and then look at his stats. They look a lot more encouraging. Like I said, I know you can't just cherry pick stats, especially if a guy's only throwing 60 innings a year. You can't just eliminate 15 to 20% of those. But I think Trevor May has the potential to be a solid mid-rotation starter, and that the Twins are sort of doing him a disservice by having him in the bullpen. I'd be curious to see what happens in spring training if he's given a legitimate shot at the rotation, or if it's like last year, where they give him a couple starts and then, just kind of pick. They're like, well, it's a numbers game and other people are healthy, so May to the bullpen. If he's your 8th inning guy, fine. I'm not saying that there's not value in that, but I think you'll get more value out of Trevor May if he's in the starting rotation, so there's another guy. Third name on the list should be fairly obvious. J.O. Berrios needs to have a better year. Top pitching prospect in the Twins organization. Great numbers in the minor leagues. Strikes out a lot of guys. And not that that's the only stat that matters, but he also limits runs. Good ERA, good strikeout to walk ratio, a solid numbers, and a solid repertoire of pitches. The 4-seamers in the mid to upper 90s. The 2-seamer moves like crazy. He's got a pretty good changeup. I actually liked his changeup last year. And then he's got a curveball that doesn't embarrass you either. J.O. Berrios probably needs to be better for the Twins starting rotation to really turn it around in 2017. But Jeffrey, to answer your question, there are 3 guys that I would expect more out of this year, which makes it a little more understandable that they haven't gone out and spent some of the big money on a starting pitcher. Man, I got to start flying through these, I think, guys, because I got to hit the road kind of soon to get to the studio to do the Twins conversation. 11:45 with Mackie and Judd. Roger Irwin asks, now that Plouffe is gone, is there a backup plan for Sano at third if he doesn't develop at the position? Can Sano move to first base? First base at Mauer Park situation? We have a lot of moving pieces, especially if Dozier... Oh, your comment cut off. Oh, there we go. Especially if Dozier leaves. Yeah, a lot of moving parts. It makes it fun and interesting for me. Backup plan for Sano? Hard to say for sure, but wouldn't you expect a guy like, an Eduardo Escobar? They gave him a contract. He's here on a 1 year. I think he'll be a utility guy. I don't think he'll be the starting shortstop. Now, if Dozier leaves, it might change that conversation. But Eduardo Escobar is a serviceable backup third baseman, at least in the interim. Could Sano eventually move to first base? Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't play around with that this year. I would spend all of 2017 figuring out, beyond the shadow of a doubt, can Miguel Sano play third base in the major leagues, and can he do it for 150 games? If he can't, you're going to have to change some long-term plan stuff. You start shifting this around. You look at Mauer's contract. It's done in 2018. Maybe Sano becomes a first base DH-man type. But I think that'd be selling low or selling short Miguel Sano. I think it's possible he could become, decent third baseman. I've had some people tell me that he's a league average third baseman. I've had some people say that they see him being more than that in the future, being a plus player at third base. We'll see. Obviously, the track record's pretty spotty. I wrote about that in my column yesterday, 1500ESPN.com, basically a Miguel Sano overview. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. How about that for all the self-promotion? But it's a good question, Roger. I don't know what the backup plan is right now. Let's wait till spring training and see what roster pieces are in place. But with Plouffe gone, I think it frees up a spot for Sano to prove or disprove his ability to play third base. I think that's what 2017 should be about for the Twins and Sano. Will Park be at DH this spring? Yeah, I think he'll be DH and first base. I think if he makes the team, it's as a DH. And that's a good sign for Park, not necessarily a good sign for Kenny Vargas. I'd put those two guys sort of in the same position and let them compete for it. I think... I don't know what to think of Park because we have such a small sample size, and I think he was hurt last year. But if you have two guys as the backup first baseman, DH, I think that's a waste of a roster spot. I don't care if they can hit. I want somebody who can play positionally in the field. I want to have, a bullpen that's 7 relievers, including the closer. Roster flexibility is a big thing these days in Major League Baseball. I think it's critically important, and if you had both of them make the team, I don't see it working unless somebody else got hurt somewhere or whatever. But I'd expect Park to be the sort of like the favorite for DH and backup first baseman, and Kenny Vargas with a good spring certainly could knock him off that. I've also been saying I think Kenny Vargas makes sense to trade. If some team wants to take a flyer on him, I'd let them take it. I don't have any sense that that's going to happen, but that's it's something that we've talked about in these videos a little bit before. Bernie Lauer asks, are you roasting chestnut on an open fire? Love the background. Yeah, there actually is a fireplace here. It's inoperable, though, so it's not quite as cool. Bernie, I thought you'd comment on the sweater. You like the sweater game today? Following in your footsteps, Bernie. Thanks for stopping by. Michael Bush. Oh, hey, perfect. A sweater question. I didn't even tee that up. Derek, as you're dressed for a holiday TV Christmas special, your comment's cutting off. I got to see more. Sans the crackling fire. I know. I wish this was operable. It's just not. I'm sorry. What are the odds you'll be launching into an Andy Williams, Rosemary Clooney duet at the end of the broadcast, baby? It's cold outside. If you've seen these videos before, you know I'm the non-zero guy, and I would say the chances of that are 0. But that's kind of funny. Thanks, Michael. A couple more questions from Michael, too. Second best question. Your view of the potential for the Twins' Rule 5 pickups, the pitcher they picked up from the Angels. Yeah, Haley, right? And that's from you're right, Angels. It all runs together for me as I do sort of the 2017 roster prep stuff. I said this in a video before. Justin Haley, I believe is his name. Sorry if I'm getting that wrong, Justin. He is a potential long man for the Twins. They said, GM Thad Levine said they're going to bring him into camp as a starting pitcher. I don't see that happening. I've seen his minor league numbers. They're nice. They're quietly nice. But you go back and look at his AAA ERA last year. I think he had a sub-3 ERA, I want to say. Just a nice pitcher, but I wouldn't expect him to be a starting rotation, like a real legitimate candidate. If he's sort of a back-end guy that has the potential to make the rotation with some injuries, that's maybe fine. I think more likely he's a reliever for the Twins long-term, and if they're going to keep him on the roster this year, my guess is that it would be as a long man. Keep in mind, though, they kept Ryan Presley around all year, and there were some people saying at the time, boy, I'm not sure this makes a lot of sense. Ryan Presley's a great reliever now. In fact, between Ryan Presley, Brandon Kinsler, and Glenn Perkins potentially, the bullpen I think looks stronger this year on paper, at least those top 3 spots, than I would have said it did last year. Now, Trevor May, I'm pulling out of that mix because I'd put him in the starting rotation, but Ryan Presley, quietly a really solid reliever for the Twins. I wrote at one point, future closer potential. I think that might be stretching the ceiling a little bit high, but if Ryan Presley's your 8th inning guy this year for the Twins, you're probably feeling okay about that. So anyway, sometimes it makes sense to keep Rule 5 guys along, and then the J.R. Graham situation was different. They kept him around all year. It's not like they killed him. It's not like he killed them by being on the roster, but there were some times where there was a roster crunch where he survived. Somebody maybe more deserving went to the minors, and then they wound up really not keeping him long-term, trading him to the Yankees at the beginning of last year. I don't know what to expect from the new regime because I haven't had any experience with how they treat Rule 5 drafts, but if they like this pitcher and they were giddy that they got him, I talked to Falvey and Levine after the draft, after all the trade scenarios went down and all the pieces were done moving. They were excited to get this guy. They think their scouts gave good reports on him, and they trust that. And basically, pulled the trigger on the trade, got the kid, talked him up as a starting pitcher. I don't really see that. I'll have to see him in camp before I make a real final judgment. But just based on his numbers, I'd expect more of a bullpen arm. So let's look forward to that as a spring training storyline. Whether they'll keep him in the bullpen, whether he fits the 25-man roster construction that they want. Otherwise, I think it's a fallacy that teams are scared to offer Rule 5 guys back. They're not. You just got them for free, basically. The Twins lost Stuart Turner, and that sort of stinks for them. They could use some of the catching depth, but I don't know that they're like these precious commodities unless you see them as having a real long-term upside, potential starting potential, or in this case, maybe as a bullpen arm. We'll see. I wouldn't think it'd be the end of the world if they had to offer him back, but I also could see him sticking around all year and becoming a nice reliever for him. Who knows? Michael says, How optimistic are you that the sabermetric approach will improve the Twins at the fringes? Difficult to quantify. Oh, I got to see more on this question. Difficult to quantify, he says, but given the apparent astuteness of Falvey and Levine in public discussions, things are definitely leaning in the right direction, in my honest opinion. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I don't know how much more I can really add to it other than I think both of them talk a smart game, and we just sort of have to wait and see what their moves are like. I haven't had anything. I'll say this. So I cover the Twins. Off-season, I'm focusing kind of more on the Vikings, but that's what I do here at 1500 ESPN is a Twins coverage. And to me, I've had only a handful of discussions with these guys, right? And interactions, and by interactions in this case, I mean either reading something that they said or seeing them in a video of something they said previously when they were with the Indians or Rangers, respectively. So I've got like a pretty limited grasp, right, of the full picture. But with that being said, I have not heard anything from either one of them that made me stop and say, hold on a second. I don't get that, or I don't agree with what you're saying there. And just because I disagree, for the record, doesn't mean that they're wrong and I'm right. It just means as I see the way that the Twins are put together and the way that I think about baseball, they've been step for step talking about improving the roster on the fringes, making long-term sustainable decisions, things that make you a championship caliber team for years and years and years rather than kind of putting all your eggs in one basket, mortgaging the future kind of thing. We think along the same lines based on what I've heard from them. So I'll have to wait and see, give you a better judgment on that question, Michael. But, I mean, I wouldn't do anything to squash your optimism. We'll have to wait and see how Falvey is at leading a department. I mean, he's 33 years old and never done this before. So it's not to say that this is easily, a guaranteed home run hire. But I've been impressed from both Thad Levine and Derek Falvey, the way that they've addressed things in public and the way they talk about roster construction, those kinds of things. I think they're encouraging signs if you're a Twins fan. That's a good question, Michael. 3 in a row, boy. I don't know if my phone just gives them to me like that or if you actually asked all 3 of them in a row, but thanks for stopping by. We'll get to a couple more from Tim, and then I got to run. Are there more questions here? Sorry, Tim. I'll get to your questions once I get my phone on them. Okay, Tim Stang. And thanks for stopping by. I see you here every week. A couple of likes for that. Okay. Tim, will John Ryan Murphy ever be back? Yeah, he'll be in camp. He'll be in spring training. Probably penciled in as the backup catcher right now. I mean, Mitch Garver's in that conversation, and I think you could see Garver breaking camp with the Twins as their backup. But I think, obviously, Jason Castro is expected to start, and Molitor mentioned something about a 2/3, 1/3 split. It's not set in stone, but that seems about right. I mean, Castro probably catch 100, 115 games or something like that. I think that's okay. And if the Twins leverage the platoon advantage like Molitor talked about, I think they could have... I think that signing looks even better if they're not exposing Castro to all the lefties that he struggles so badly against and dragged down his overall average. If you got Garver or John Ryan Murphy in the lineup a couple times a week, fine. For the record, John Ryan Murphy, probably a better player than what he showed last year. How could he not be? But I do think that 2016 casts real long-term concerns about, like, is he the guy? Can he? I mean, they traded for him, right, hoping he'd be the eventual starting catcher. They hoped that by the end of the year, that Kurt Suzuki was backing up John Ryan Murphy. It didn't work out that way, but I don't know if you can really just, like, wrap up 2016 and throw it away. I think I'd try to if I was him because he's a better player than that. But who knows? I'm not sure exactly what to expect out of him, but definitely the optimism must be tempered based on that season that he had. Keep in mind, he's only 25, so I think he's 25. So that's not to say that he could never be a player. And to answer your question directly, will he ever be back? Yeah, he'll be back. He'll be in Fort Myers competing for a job. But to just assume that he's locked in and for sure going to be the guy and last year was just a total aberration, don't know what happened, I think that'd be a little naive. I think you have to kind of consider both. You have to consider that he had a good career minor leagues, and he was a prospect that was at least somewhat well thought of in the Yankees organization. Some people analyzing the trade said some pretty good things about the Twins for being able to pluck a guy like John Ryan Murphy. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is 2016, and you sort of just try to balance those the best you can in your head. That's what I try to do with players all the time. If a guy had a down year, if he's a veteran and he has a long track record, I'm more likely to overlook that. But as a young player and a guy who doesn't have a lot of established credibility in the big leagues, probably a little bit more concerning over someone like John Ryan Murphy. Tim Stang, over-under, Jose Berrios, 8.5 wins. I don't like wins for pitchers, but over. Oops. Give you a like on that one. Thanks for coming by, Tim. Those are all the questions I see in my queue. If there are others, I'm sorry. I will get to them later when I'm checking them on my old Facebook page. Go check that out, Derek Wetmore MLB. Plenty more stuff there. Thanks for coming by 1500 ESPN. And if you want to hear me on the radio, the other side of things, I'm going on with Mackie and Judd in about an hour, 11:45 Central Time. We'll talk Twins. We'll talk MLB. We'll talk all of the money that the closers are getting these days. Plenty of fun stuff left. So thanks for coming by Facebook Live. We'll do it again next week if you want to. And until then, thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you guys later.